What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch back here with another fantasy football rankings video. In this video, I'm going to give you my draft board and my rankings and my thoughts on every wide receiver going into your 2019 fantasy season, helping you win your fantasy championship in 2019. Before I give you my rankings and which round you should be picking each and every wide receiver, Grog spike the like button, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more fantasy videos just like this, and comment below your opinion. What do you think of my list? What do you think of my rankings? And also, any questions you have, fantasy related, wide receiver related, this list related, let me know in the comments section below. Let's kick off my fantasy football rankings with the first round. And more than most fantasy football voices or analysts out there, I have quite a few wide receivers in my first round on my draft board. I have a total of 6 wide receivers in my first round that I would select, and I feel comfortable and confident selecting in the first round, and I believe you should take this approach as well. Outside of the top 6 running backs, which you could go see in my running back rankings video, I have the rest of the first round, if you're in a 12-team league, being wide receivers. And we started off with DeAndre Hopkins. If you're at the number 7 spot, I do believe you should take DeAndre Hopkins in your fantasy draft, because I think DeAndre Hopkins is just about the safest player you could select in fantasy. And the reason being is because DeAndre Hopkins is often not injured. He more than likely is going to play 16 games. He has Deshaun Watson, who absolutely peppers him with targets. He is the most targeted receiver in football, and he's always one of the top receivers in fantasy. He also is a player that doesn't really have much outside of him on his offense. So some other players like OBJ or Julio, some of these other receivers that are upper echelon in the NFL, they have other targets on their offense that take away receptions from them, but not really in DeAndre Hopkins' offense. Will Fuller is often injured and not on the football field, and Kiki Kote is already injured. Duke Johnson is there, but I don't really see that affecting the chemistry that we've seen between DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson. Many people would also argue that DeAndre Hopkins might be the pure best receiver in the game from a talent perspective. Hopkins, in my opinion, is so safe. He gets the touchdowns, he gets the receptions, he gets the yards. There is just about nothing that DeAndre Hopkins cannot do. So that's why he's here at number 1 as my number 1 fantasy receiver going into 2019. At number 2, you could make an argument that Davante Adams could be number 1 because he is the number 1 go-to target for Aaron Rodgers. And the go-to number 1 target for Aaron Rodgers very often produces a lot of touchdowns. If you are in a standard league, I would consider Davante Adams the best receiver in fantasy football, but because these are PPR rankings, he's number 2 for me. I don't think Davante Adams will get as many catches or receptions as DeAndre Hopkins or maybe even like a Julio Jones, but I do feel like he is the safest to get 10 plus touchdowns. If you look back at Aaron Rodgers' number 1 target over the past 3 to 4, even 5 seasons, they often finish with over 10 touchdowns, including Davante Adams the past 2 seasons. Adams has proven that with his route running ability, his savviness, his connection with Aaron Rodgers, he is an elite receiver in the game. He has really improved over the past 2 seasons and broke out last year. And if you look at the rest of the receiving core for the Packers, there's not much behind him that's actually proven. Rodgers will target him in the red zone, on 3rd down, and he's just a very safe option in the first round to go with. And he's going to give you great upside at your wide receiver 1 because he might win you some weeks with multiple touchdown performances. At number 3 on my wide receiver rankings, I have Odell Beckham Jr., personally my favorite receiver in the NFL. He is probably the most electrifying receiver in the NFL and one of the most talented players in all of football. Odell Beckham Jr. possesses great breakaway speed and ability to take the football from anywhere on the field and score a touchdown with incredible route running. And I do believe he's in the best situation he's ever been in his NFL career. And I honestly feel like we could see the best season we've ever seen from Odell this season. And that's saying a lot because Odell's had some fantastic years in his past, but just if he stays healthy, plays all 16 games alongside Baker Mayfield, the coverage being taken away from him with Jarvis Landry underneath, a good running game with Nick Chubb and David Njoku at tight end, I feel like Odell is going to have all the opportunity in the world to potentially challenge Devontae Adams as the leading touchdown guy in football, along with getting over 100 receptions and possibly challenging guys like Julio Jones and DeAndre Hopkins for the yardage total as well. I could see Odell finishing as the wide receiver 1 this season, but I am being a little bit conservative by ranking him here at number 3. I think he's going to have an incredible season. We've already seen the chemistry with him and Baker Mayfield, and I can only imagine what Odell's actually going to be able to do with a real NFL quarterback. At number 4, I have the Mr. Consistent Julio Jones. Now, Julio Jones has one thing that people just dock Julio Jones for is his inability to score touchdowns. It really hasn't been a consistent pace for Julio over the past few seasons. He isn't ranking amongst the best in the league for touchdowns. But where Julio Jones is incredible is receptions and yards. He's led the NFL in yards like 3 out of the past 4 seasons. Receptions, he's been right up there with the best of them. So he's going to be there as long as he's healthy. And the thing about Julio, he's often banged up, but he often plays through injury, which I don't see how that's going to change now. The offensive coordinator change for Atlanta is going to be a great one because Dirk Cutter, actually the only coordinator to constantly target Julio within the red zone and get him those red zone touchdowns. I could see that coming back to this offense with Cutter making it a point to get Julio the ball in the red zone. We also saw Julio late last season over the past stretch of the season really get in the end zone quite often. So that might be something that is trending upward for Julio. He does have good targets around him that may take away some receptions, but Julio is still, in my opinion, the best receiver in all of football and a top 4 fantasy option this season on one of the best offenses in all of football. At number 5, I have Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is the most explosive receiver in the entire NFL and probably the most explosive player on offense in all of football. Tyreek Hill, just like Odell, has that incredible ability to take the football anywhere on the field and score a touchdown. He is a threat on every play to score a touchdown because of his incredible speed, his deep ability down the field, and there are going to be certain games, which is why I love Tyreek Hill on my fantasy team, where he is going to take over and win you the game and win you the week, no doubt. Because he'll have a game where he has close to 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, maybe he has a punt return. Like, he's going to have those type of games where he just goes absolutely berserk and off. But there are going to be some games with Tyreek where he isn't as consistent as the top 4 and giving you a solid floor because he is that wide receiver where he's rather boom or bust a little bit more than these guys, but his boom is so great, and he's with Patrick Mahomes. He's Patrick Mahomes' number 1 wide receiver, and he's on the best offense in football. I just don't see how Tyreek Hill is not a top 5 option in fantasy, even if he doesn't catch as many passes as other people, even if he isn't as consistent as some of these elite options. And at number 6, the last receiver I would pick in the first round is Juju Smith-Schuster, taking over for Antonio Brown as the number 1 target in Pittsburgh. Juju basically was the number 1 target in Pittsburgh last year, leading the team in receptions and in yards. He just didn't lead the team in touchdowns, which AB did in 2018. But in 2019, I could see his touchdown number going up, probably his reception number and yards number staying about the same. I don't see it going up, but I do see Juju Smith-Schuster seeing a ton of targets. He's probably going to see the number 1 corner on a lot of teams, which people are a little bit afraid of, but Juju is such a great receiver. You know he is one of the best talents in the league. I'm not really too concerned about that. Plus, Pittsburgh finds multiple different creative ways to get him the football. He often lines up in the slot to get the best advantage possible. And Ben has been known to get his number one wide receiver the football more than just about any quarterback in the league. So I really trust Juju for these big games. And the reason why I have Juju over a guy like Michael Thomas is just because I think he has a little bit more of an upside in terms of the ability to finish as the number one or number two receiver in all of fantasy. Well, I feel like Michael Thomas, who's number one in my second round ranking overall at number 7, has maybe a little bit more that he's proven, and he's a little bit more consistent over the course of his career so far, and we kind of know more about Michael Thomas. But also in knowing more about Michael Thomas, we know that he's never been a number one in terms of the number one receiver in fantasy or the number 2. He's been in the top 5 before, but never the top 3. So that being said, Juju, I think, has that capability with Big Ben in a more pass-heavy offense, while the Saints, and Michael Thomas is amazing, and he's the number one guy I pick overall 13 or pick number 14, something like that, in the early second. I'd be thrilled to pick Michael Thomas, no doubt about it. But Michael Thomas, he's a high reception guy, high floor guy, not necessarily a high ceiling guy, because I think Drew Brees, this offense, isn't going to be passing as much, even that it did in 2018, that they will in 2019. I think they're going to become more of a run-heavy offense, even more so than they were last year. So that being said, I think Michael Thomas's numbers, they'll probably be about the same, but Juju has that higher ceiling to break off and pop off any given week. At number 8, I have Mike Evans. Mike Evans is a monster. I'm really high on Mike Evans this year. I actually think Mike Evans could finish as a top 5 receiver, but I'm kind of being conservative here at number 8 and the second receiver in the second round on my draft board. Mike Evans, the thing about him this year is he's in a Bruce Arians offense, which is known to get the ball down the field, which Mike Evans excels at. Jameis Winston's going to be his quarterback. Jameis Winston loves Mike Evans, and Jameis Winston is not afraid of throwing the ball deep and not afraid of giving his receivers a chance. And the third thing is that some of the targets like Deshaun Jackson, like Adam Humphries, those guys are gone, which is going to allow Mike Evans to get more opportunity in the offense just in general. So that being said, Mike Evans, if he does get more targets than he has in the past, if he does bring in some more receptions, you could see Mike Evans become a top 5 fantasy option, not just a top 10. But right now, I have him at number 8, just below some of the really elite receivers in fantasy. At number 9, I have Antonio Brown, and I'm going to put an asterisk beside number 9, Antonio Brown, because I could see him dropping a little bit lower. I was even considering dropping him to number 10 just before I recorded this, but the news has come out that Antonio Brown may not even play because he's a diva and he wants his certain helmet from last season that is not allowed and is not regulation in the NFL anymore. It's been banned. So I know Tom Brady had like the same sort of helmet. He's not allowed to wear that helmet. Antonio Brown, he's a diva. I think he'll still play. I don't really want to read too much into this right now, so I'm going to put an asterisk beside it. But if he's fine, if he's playing, he's number 9 on my list. If he's not, then potentially he's not even going to be on this list. But for AB, he's going to a new situation with Oakland. Traditionally, he's been a top 5 fantasy option, but baked into his ranking is the fact that Derek Carr is not Ben Roethlisberger, and even though John Gruden's going to get him the ball a ton because he loves Antonio Brown and he loves new toys, that's John Gruden, always been, and he loves veteran receivers, so AB's going to get plenty of looks. But at the same time, you're not just going to build that chemistry with Carr that you had with Big Ben. That's just not going to happen right away. So, and Ben Roethlisberger is one of the best deep passers of all time. Derek Carr is not. So even though I don't hate Derek Carr as a quarterback, he's not Big Ben, so you have to bake that into this. But AB is the clear number 1 here. He has no juju. Like Tyrell Williams is good, but he's no juju. At number 2, he's going to be the clear number 1. He's going to be peppered with targets, and if he's playing, he'll score plenty of touchdowns. He'll gather plenty of receptions and have plenty of yards. I just don't think he's the same number 1 best receiver in the league. I still think he's top 5 in the NFL in terms of a talent, but here at number 9 in terms of a fantasy receiver. At number 10, I have Keenan Allen, who, like I said, I considered placing at number 9 on my list, maybe even above AB, but until we see some news on that Antonio Brown situation, actually relevant news, I am not going to place him any higher than 10, but I feel like I'm already pretty high on Keenan Allen because I feel like with Tyrell Williams gone, Keenan Allen is going to have a great season, and if Melvin Gordon is not playing, this means Keenan Allen's going to have an even better season than previously situated. I feel like Keenan Allen has something to prove this year. His Madden rating was low. Everyone's disrespecting him. He's motivated. And Keenan Allen, to me, has already proven he is elite. He is Phillip Rivers' go-to guy. And I feel like a little bit fantasy owners are sour on him because of the way he finished last season, got injured in that Kansas City game. It burned me, but I'm not willing to say that's enough to burn me this year and not pick him in the second round. Keenan Allen's extremely consistent. He is a reception magnet. He's a fantastic route runner, one of the best in the league, great off the line on his release and getting by press coverage. And like I said, he's good in the red zone. He's good between the 20s. I mean, he might lose some touchdowns to Mike Williams, who is a red zone friggin' monster, but Keenan Allen is still extremely good and has a great connection with Phillip Rivers. You cannot go wrong with Keenan Allen in the second round. I do feel like there's a little bit of a tier break here when we go from number 10 to 11 and 12 in the second round. 11 for me is T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton has an amazing connection with Andrew Luck, but now that we know the news about Andrew Luck possibly being a little bit banged up, again, just like the AB situation, I'm not going to read too much into it, so it doesn't really affect my ranking that much yet. I'm just going to say that that's a possibility that Andrew Luck does not play a couple games or does not play a period of this season. Maybe he's going to be injured, and that will definitely hurt TY's ranking, and we'll have to know that before we draft. If you're drafting right now, though, I would take T.Y. Hilton at number 11 because T.Y. Hilton is so good, and he has such a great connection with Andrew Luck. He's a great downfield receiver, and yes, the Colts added some weapons around him, but that might even lessen the load in terms of lessen the pressure on T.Y. Hilton to take all the coverage from certain teams and get the double teams because other targets can actually kill you on this offense, not like last year or the year previous. I do feel like Hilton is a very good option, and at points last season, he would win you games. I had T.Y. in a lot of leagues last year because I was high on Luck and T.Y. last year, and it proved me to be right. But T.Y. had like some 200-yard games, and I just want to say every time he plays the Texans, make sure you start him. But he's here at number 11. At number 12, I have Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper, I think, is going to have a really good season this year with Dak Prescott, and I think that connection will grow throughout training camp, throughout the preseason, and just practices in general. They didn't have that opportunity last year. I mean, Cooper was traded to the team. Boom, he was in the starting lineup, and he became very fantasy relevant as like a number one fantasy receiver. He will have his inconsistencies at times. He will have matchups against corners that don't treat him so well because Cooper's not like a top 5 receiver where it doesn't matter who's covering him. At certain times, it does matter who's covering Cooper, and he will have his bad games. But he'll also have games where he goes for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did that last year. He probably will do that this year. And as the primary number one, no doubt about it, on this Cowboys receiving game, I also feel like Kellen Moore's offense is going to help Dak Prescott, help Amari Cooper get in better situations as a receiver. And we could see Amari Cooper finally cash in as that potential and as that talent as the number 12 overall fantasy option. Really like him at the end of the second round. Diving into the third round, Adam Thielen is my 13th overall receiver. Adam Thielen was the number 1 receiver in fantasy for quite a stretch early in last season, and he was winning me games like nonstop. Adam Thielen is a still PPR monster. He's going to get a lot of receptions, and he is Kirk Cousins' go-to guy. He's a fantastic route runner, whether it's in the slot or out on the outside. He actually has some pretty underrated hands and ability to go up and get it for a white dude, just being honest. Adam Thielen is just an excellent all-around receiver, and he is probably closer to the second round than he is in this group of the third round. Like, I feel like he's clearly the best player of this third round, but I had to rank him here because I like too many running backs in the second round. So that being said, really like Thielen. I could see him as a late second if you want to take him there, but definitely an early third round pick. I think it's definitely worth it. I don't see his productivity changing. I wouldn't really look too much into his late season numbers last year. I just think that was more of the Vikings offense than it really is anything to do with Thielen. I think Thielen will be back right on pace as one of the best receivers in the game. At number 14, I have his teammate, his duo member, Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is another excellent receiver, plays for the same team. The thing about Diggs, though, that I don't think exists with Thielen is I feel like Thielen is more consistent. He's going to have a higher floor than Diggs. While Diggs might have just as many big games as Thielen, Thielen won't put up as many stinkers as Diggs does. Diggs is on the same area as Cooper, where he'll have some phenomenal games, and when Kirk Cousins is on fire, that's when you'll see Diggs just going off, some deep touchdowns and all that. But at the same time, he'll have games where he disappears and you'll be wondering why you picked him. So that's why Diggs is here at 14 and not in the elite company, but he's still a very good option in the second round, where if he's your number one receiver, I wouldn't feel bad because he'll have that number one capability. At number 15, I have Robert Woods. Robert Woods is like the best number two receiver, I think, because he's going to have like games where he's really good, but he's never going to put up a stinker. He's just really, really consistent. And I feel like his fantasy game is just about the same as his real life kind of vision of what people think of him. Like, he's not like amazing, but he's not bad. Like, he's just really consistent, really good. He's in a good offense. He's the number one option in that offense. He's the most consistent member of that offense. He's the slot guy, but he's also plays on the outside. He has great versatility. So in this offense, it allows him not to have as many stinkers as Brandon Cooks, but it allows him more upside than Cooper Kupp. So that's kind of why he ranks the highest of the Rams receivers. This is a great offense with a great system. McVay knows how to get receivers the ball because he was a receiver himself. And Robert Woods is the one that I want to own on the Rams this year. At number 16, I have Julian Edelman. Edelman, I think, is going to have a really good season this year. Of course, he has the thumb thing, but I wouldn't be too worried about that at this point. I think he's going to come back and he'll be fine. I've had 2 broken thumbs before. I think Julian Edelman will be able to fight through it the way he looked after the ACL injury last year. He is an absolute machine. I think Edelman, he's the clear-cut number one receiver. How many times have you been able to say that in Edelman's career? Not many. I mean, 2016, that was about it. And last season, he was incredible when he was back. He was a top 12 receiver. He was a fantasy number one receiver in PPR. So I honestly feel like 16, that's with the injury problems baked into it. But you could see Edelman even be closer to the top 12 if he has a season like he did last year, except over the stretch of 16 games. I could see Edelman near 100 receptions. I could see Edelman around 7 touchdowns, around 1,000 yards, and that would be enough for a near wide receiver 1, but a very consistent, awesome floor wide receiver 2. And the last receiver in round 3 is at number 17, Brandon Cooks. The reason why I have Woods higher is because he has a higher floor. Cooks has a higher ceiling. So it depends on your preference here, but Brandon Cooks, I just rather have the guy who's a little bit higher floor. Cooks will have really big games though. He's done that everywhere he's gone, whether that's in New Orleans, New England, or now in LA. He'll have games where he has like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, and you'll be like, holy, Brandon Cooks won me the week. But then at other times, you'll be like, oh, he played a really good corner, and they shut him down, and he had 2 catches for 25 yards, and you'll be like, what? It will be sort of one of those Amari Cooper things. So Brandon Cooks, because he has so many targets around him, it kind of lowers his value as a receiver, but he's still excellent. He's still really good. Don't get me wrong. He's in a very good offense. He's going to have games where he puts it up. And the thing about Brandon Cooks that a lot of people sleep on, he's had 1,000 yards every year of his career. So don't sleep on that fact. Round number 4 is very interesting for me at the wide receiver position, and this is the round that could potentially change the most as we head into draft season. Round number 4 for me, personally, because I have so many receivers ranked higher on my list than others, is a tier that I'm not so confident in the ranking or in the players in general. Like, I'd rather go with the running backs in round 4, the way my draft board is at, than receivers, but that's just my personal opinion. When you look at my round 4, I start off with Tyler Boyd of the Cincinnati Bengals. Boyd is going to be the go-to guy in Cincy as AJ Green is injured. He put up just about the same numbers as he did when AJ Green was on the field in 2018, but I do expect those numbers to go up because Andy Dalton is going to be healthier this season, and they brought in a better offensive scheme, system, and coach. So that being said, I think Zach Taylor is going to find more creative ways to get Boyd the ball, especially without AJ Green there. Andy Dalton will pepper him with targets. So Boyd is a very safe receiver to take as your wide receiver too. As when Green is out, he's going to be very safe in terms of his floor. Like, he's never going to put up a bad game. But when AJ Green is there, I feel like he could have potentially bigger games because AJ Green is taking away some of the coverage. So when he's able to take advantage of his opportunity and matchup, he's going to have really big games. But at the same time, I don't see him having as many big games as guys like Brandon Cooks and guys of that nature. So he's just below that level, but he is a pretty safe wide receiver too, which is where I would like to have him on my roster, if not an excellent wide receiver 3. But I would not like to have Boyd as my wide receiver 1. At number 19, I have Godwin of the Tampa Bay Bucks. I'm really a big fan of Godwin. I know a lot of fantasy people are a big fan of Godwin because his skill set, his things that he does well are perfectly suited to what Bruce Arians calls in his offensive system. That is going down the field. That's a deep option in the passing game. And now without Deshaun Jackson, without Adam Humphries, he is a top 3 option in this offense, no doubt about it, probably the number 2. And he's going to have a lot of games where he has huge output. Like I could see him having a Brandon Cooks type of season where he has like some 150-yard games, where he has like 2 touchdowns in a game, where he puts up some big wide receiver 1 numbers in certain weeks because Mike Evans is taking the coverage away from him and he takes advantage of his matchup. But I could also see like him having a pretty safe floor at the same time. Like while I don't see his floor as high as Boyd because Boyd's going to have those weeks where he's just like the only option in his passing game, for Godwin, I feel like he's going to just be a very consistent wide receiver 2 on an offense that's always passing the ball because they're going to be trailing quite a bit because the Bucs are not a very good team. And like I said with Evans, Winston's going to give Godwin chances down the field. So Godwin has great opportunity here in 2019, and I'm really confident in him as a wide receiver 2 this season. At number 20, I have Kenny Golladay of the Detroit Lions. Golladay is not as high for me as maybe some other people, just because I don't think the Lions' passing offense is going to be as heavily utilized or featured as their running offense. And Kenny Golladay, I feel like the split between him and Marvin Jones is a little bit closer than other people think. Like I feel like it's more of a 1A, 1B than it is a clear-cut 1 and 2. But Golladay is the 1A in this offense. And he is Matt Stafford's number 1 target, and he is the most talented of the 2. So I will give him the advantage there. And he'll probably have 1,000 yards, but I do feel like the Lions, just as an offense, it kind of caps his ceiling a little bit. And I don't think Golladay is like a top 15 talent at this position, but I do feel like he is a top 20 talent. I rank him in here at number 20 as the 20th fantasy receiver. I like him. I don't think he's a super sexy pick. He had sort of a breakout last year, and people are expecting even better out of him this year. And I could see that happening with a healthier Matt Stafford. At number 21, I have Tyler Lockett. Now, Tyler Lockett was about as efficient as you could possibly be in the NFL last year. He had a perfect passer rating when targeted. And this year, the reason why I think he'll be about the same as last year is because he won't be as perfect as he was, but he'll have more opportunity because Doug Baldwin is gone. So that means that Russell Wilson, he's going to target Lockett a little bit more. He knows what he has in Lockett. He knows that his go-to guy. Lockett's excellent as a downfield receiver. He's kind of an underrated route runner. His speed is hard to handle. And I think he's really good, which is what Russell Wilson's really good at kind of extending the play, finding the soft spot in the zone, or just, the scramble drill. That's what Lockett is really good at, and that's what Russell Wilson is really good at, and that's where they find that connection. So I like Lockett here as a very good number 2 receiver because he has that connection with Russell Wilson, but at the same time, you might be a little bit frustrated in certain weeks because the Seahawks love to run the football, and with a run-first offense, you're not going to get as many receptions out of Lockett as you might a Godwin. So that being said, I have Lockett at 21. And at number 22, closing off the 4th round, I have Cooper Kupp. For a lot of people, Cooper Kupp is the number 3 for the Rams, and they don't think of him as a primary number 2 fantasy receiver. But this offense passes so much. They have such a great offense that they're going to score points, and all 3 of these guys can go off. All 3 of these guys are kind of like 1A, 1B, 1C. It's not really like 1, 2, 3. And a lot of the times, Cooper Kupp is targeted in the most important situations. You could argue Cooper Kupp should be higher on this list because he is often the red zone target. He's often the third down target. And over the first course of the season last year, he was the number one guy for Jared Goff, the go-to guy. And he was actually doing just as well as a guy like Robert Woods. So I honestly feel like Cooper Kupp, of the three Rams receivers, he's probably the best value, but he also doesn't have the biggest ceiling. I think that would go to Brandon Cooks, and he's not as even in terms of big games and good floor like Robert Woods, which I like about the top two guys a little bit more. But Kupp is going to have games where he has multiple touchdowns or he plays a major role in a game plan where he might outscore the other two guys. That's why he's here at number 22. In round 5, we go with 23, DJ Moore. I'm very high on the Panthers offense this year. I'm very high on McCaffrey, Newton, Norv Turner, the offensive line, DJ Moore, and Curtis Samuel. You'll hear about Curtis Samuel in just a little bit. But DJ Moore, they took him in the first round last year. He was basically their number one receiver last year, especially when Devin Funchess left. And he showed out to have some very good games. He struggled a little bit early last season with a little bit of drops, a little bit of separation issues, a little bit of fumbles. But as the season continued to go on, he developed that chemistry with Cam. He just got better as a pro receiver. And I think reports out of camp have been very positive. Both of these receivers are going to be excellent. And I feel like both could potentially have 1,000 yards. I wouldn't be shocked. DJ Moore, to me, he's just very talented. He's good with the ball in his hands. He's good after the catch. And I think he will be Cam's number one this season. At number 24 in round 5, I have Christian Kirk, who will be the number one option in Arizona and Kyler Murray's go-to guy. He first off has chemistry with Kyler Murray, and he knows this system. He knows the air raid. He knows Cliff Kingsbury's offense because he played in it and he's played with Kyler Murray. I feel like that is going to be a very easy transition for these two players, Kyler and Kirk. And I feel like Kirk's going to be the biggest beneficiary from this offense because, yeah, Larry will be there. David Johnson will get his catches. There's other rookies. But Kirk has shown out in training camp. He's the number one by every report, and he showed in his rookie season. He has talent. He has the ability. He has some underrated deep speed to get down the field. And I think Kirk could actually be one of these receivers that I have ranked a little bit higher than other people. I feel like he could have a really, really nice season this year that goes under the radar, near 1,000 yards, 1,100 yards. He might not put up like 10 touchdowns because I just don't see the Cardinals scoring that many touchdowns. But Kyler Murray is going to take his chances down the field to a speedy guy like Kirk, and Kirk can get it done. So I like him here in the 5th round. I would not sleep on Christian Kirk at number 24. At number 25, a guy that I love and a lot of other people love, that's Dante Pettis. 25, Dante Pettis. He's in Kyle Shanahan's offense. He's going to be the guy in Kyle Shanahan's offense at the receiver position, the number 2 target because George Kittle's the number 1. But I could see Pettis over 1,000 yards. I could see Pettis with 90 receptions. I think he has that type of potential. He's one of the best receivers with the ball in his hands in the entire NFL. He broke the college NCAA Wes Welker record for punt returns. So I could see Dante Pettis, the fabulous route running that we saw from him as a rookie, coupled with the amazing scheme of Kyle Shanahan, with a way better quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo. The sky's the limit for Dante Pettis. I really love getting him as my high potential, high ceiling wide receiver 3. But if you have to get him as your wide receiver 2, I don't mind it because I really like his potential. The other thing I like about Pettis is that he's the receiver that has the most versatility. So he will stay on the field the most out of all of the receivers in San Francisco. So if you're worried about the pure depth of their receiving core, I would not be worried because Pettis will be the guy to be out there the most. At number 26, Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. He will be in no doubt the number 2 in Atlanta's offense. I don't see him getting as many touchdowns as he did last year. I just don't think that's going to happen, but I could see him getting more receptions or more yards this year. I think he'll be around 1,000 yards. I think Matt Ryan's going to throw close to 4,500, 5,000 yards once again, which would mean that probably there's at least room for 2 players to get 1,000 yards, and that's Julio and Ridley. And I feel like Ridley Some people are down on him. Some people are high on him. It kind of depends who you ask. I think he's very good, and I think the thing about him is he doesn't have to be a wide receiver number 1 on his offense. He just needs to be a number 2. And oftentimes, because Julio is so good, he'll take that coverage away from him. And when Ridley has the clear advantage over the opposing corner, a guy that's covering him, he's going to go off. So that's the thing I like about Ridley, is that he has the potential to win you some weeks with his pure ability and to basically out-scheme receivers. Plus, Dirk Cutter. Don't sleep on Dirk Cutter and his offense and that difference between last year and this year in 2019. At number 27, I have Mike Williams of the LA Chargers. I love Mike Williams. I think Mike Williams is going far too late in drafts this year. I love him as a number 3 because this is a guy that's going to get 10 touchdowns. I could probably stat him for 10 touchdowns right now. He is a touchdown monster. And when you get as many touchdowns as Mike Williams, that means you have a very good floor because you're going to get those 6 points. Honestly, I'm saying I think he's going to get 10 to 13 touchdowns. I'm not even being like ridiculous by saying this. He is a red zone monster. Plus, Tyrell Williams is gone, so I feel like the uptick in receptions is going to be there. We saw his potential in games against Kansas City, where he can be a number 1 receiver for this offense if need be. I feel like the split between Allen and Williams is a lot closer than people think. This guy was drafted around the top 10 in his draft, and he's kind of been able to develop into a really nice receiver. It was sort of like his rookie year last year for the most part, and this is kind of like his second sophomore jump, so I feel like he's going to take that jump. His connection with Rivers is only getting better, and like I said, the guy is a beast. At number 28, Jarvis Landry of the Cleveland Browns. Landry, I think people are sleeping on how many catches Landry is going to get in this offense. When you think about potentially potent offenses in the NFL, there's usually a guy that gets a lot of touchdowns, a lot of yards, and I feel like that will be Odell. And there's a guy that gets a lot of receptions. Not maybe as many touchdowns, but a lot of receptions. I feel like the compliment that Odell gives Landry is that defenses will be afraid of Odell's ability to go deep and burn a defense, which will mean that Landry will get a lot of receptions, which means that he's a very good floor receiver. I think that Jarvis Landry is an excellent third receiver to have on your team, if not a borderline number 2. I think Landry is going to have his games. Didn't really have the best connection with Baker last year, but like I said, I don't think he's a number 1 receiver. I think he's a really good number 2. So for me, I have Landry at the end of the 5th round and probably a little bit higher than some other people. Number 29, the last receiver in the 5th round, I have Curtis Samuel. Some people at home might be like, holy, he is high on Curtis Samuel. Well, I'm riding the hype train because he has been getting incredible reports out of training camp that not only is he one of the best receivers in camp, if not the best receiver in camp, better than DJ Moore potentially, but he's one of the best players in camp. And Cam Newton has developed a chemistry with him. He's just taken significant strides towards being a really good receiver. Even his coach, Ron Rivera, has said he is light years better than where he was as a rookie. So Curtis Samuel, he has great speed, great ability after the catch. I feel like they're going to find multiple different ways to get him the ball. And like I said with Moore, I think him and Moore could both get 1,000 yards. I don't think that's crazy to think. I think this offense is the best Cam's ever had in his career, which would mean that it's very well possible that both receivers could have excellent seasons. And I'm actually really excited when I get Curtis Samuel as my number 3. I think this is about as high as you'll ever see him ranked for me or anyone else, but I think it's definitely worth picking Curtis Samuel on the borderline of the 5th to 6th round. Going into that 6th round, I kick it off with Robbie Anderson. Now, I'm a little bit down on Robbie Anderson compared to some other people because I do feel like Anderson is really inconsistent. I think like Sam Darnold might develop better into the season, which is why I have him here at number 30. But Darnold didn't really develop a great chemistry with Anderson until late last season, and then we kind of saw them do very well. I think other people have him maybe a little bit higher, some a little bit lower. But I think Anderson, he's going to have those games where he has like 4 receptions for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. But he's also going to have games where he's targeted 6 times, but he only has 3 catches for 45 yards. Like, He's not a high reception guy. He's not a great PPR guy. He's more of a boom or bust, which I don't love having on my team. So that being said, he's a really good receiver 3. If you get him as your number 2 receiver, I wouldn't be too happy about that. But again, as a number 3 receiver with the potential to put up big games like he has, because he's a deep threat, I do like that. But receiver 2, not so much. At number 31, I have Allen Robinson. Now, Allen Robinson should probably be ranked higher than this, but because we don't know the uncertainty of the wide receiver position in Chicago and who the number 1, who the number 2, number 3, and number 4, there's so many targets in Chicago. I feel like Trubisky's going to spread the ball around. I don't feel like Allen Robinson's going to be a consistent guy week in, week out, which to me is not very valuable on my fantasy team. I don't know when to start him. I don't know when to sit him. So to me, most of the time, I'm avoiding Allen Robinson, but if his value is too good to pass up, I will pick him. So I like to get him as a flex or a wide receiver 3, even a bench option. He would be an awesome wide receiver 4 if you go wide receiver heavy early on, then you go to running back in the 4th, 5th rounds, and then you go back to receiver in the 6th round. Then you can snag a guy like Allen Robinson because the potential to be the clear number 1 is there, but I just don't see it being super clear because guys like Anthony Miller are good, Trey Burton, David Montgomery, Tariq Cohen, there's a lot of weapons to pass the ball to. At number 32, Alshon Jeffrey of the Philadelphia Eagles. Alshon Jeffrey is a lot like Robbie Anderson, where I like having him as a number 3 because he's going to score some touchdowns and he's going to have some big games, but he'll also be injured for probably a portion of the season. He'll probably not put up some good numbers in certain games where Deshaun Jackson goes off or Zach Ertz goes off, or maybe they're running the ball. Carson Wentz has so many options that Alshon Jeffrey can't be counted on to me as a top 2 receiving option for your fantasy team. But if you get him as a number 3, I love it because he'll have those big time games like I suggested. So Alshon Jeffrey is here at number 32. At number 33, AJ Green. Now AJ Green is injured. AJ Green is a guy that if I am going wide receiver heavy, if I'm going 0 RB, I'm going AJ Green as my number 4. Because if I have AJ Green on the bench, and then when AJ Green's playing, I know I have a number 1 wide receiver on my bench that I can just place in as my flex. Woo! I'm loving that. So AJ Green is a guy you got to see how his health is. You got to see how he trends towards the season. I wouldn't be someone to pick him as a top 2 receiver. As my wide receiver 2, I would not want AJ Green. But as my wide receiver 3 or 4, I'd be willing to take the risk on AJ Green because he's so good when he plays that it's worth the investment. At number 34, I have Will Fuller. And in the same way as AJ Green, I like Will Fuller this season more so than the past couple of seasons because he's so injury prone. He gets injured a lot. But when he's on the field, and he's healthier this year, which I'm happy about. Plus the news about Kiki Kote, I could potentially move him up this list. But with Will Fuller, he's going to be the number 2 option in a pass-heavy offense with Deshaun Watson, who's a fantasy magician. DeAndre Hopkins can't get every pass. Somebody else has to get it. And Will Fuller's the clear number 2. And Will Fuller is a very talented player who could put up numbers in his own right. And we've seen when he's healthy, he can put up huge numbers. So I actually like Will Fuller a lot as a number 3 receiver. And he's a guy that, again, if I'm going wide receiver heavy, if I get him as my number 4, I am very happy about that because when he's healthy, I know I can put him in my lineup. If he's injured, I don't really have to worry about it because he's on my bench. Going into the 7th round, D.D. Westbrook is a receiver that I'm pretty high on. Even if he's in Jacksonville, I think Nick Foles will be able to get him the football. He had a pretty good season last year, all things considered. He was around 900 yards last year, and that's pretty good. He was the clear-cut number 1 receiver in Jacksonville. I think he'll be that this year. I think he's only getting better. He showed his progression last year. He showed that he has the talent. I think he'll finally get over the hump. I think he could be near 1,000 yards this year. Nick Foles, one thing that he does very well is he gets his number 1 targets the ball, and he gives them an opportunity to go up and get it. And I think that's what he'll do with D.D. Westbrook. Big fan of his talent, fan of the quarterback change, fan of the opportunity. There's a lot of receivers in Jacksonville, but none of them are as good as D.D. That's why I have him here at number 35. At number 36, in my opinion, the number 1 target in New York, and that is going to be Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard is a slot receiver, and that is the same as every other Giants receiver on their roster, but he's the best out of all of them. He's far better than Golden Tate at this point in his career. He's a pretty talented guy, and I could see him being a very safe type of player that you want on your fantasy team. Like, if you have a guy like Will Fuller on your roster, maybe you go back-to-back with him and Shepard because you know, okay, well, Shepard might not have the high ceiling that Fuller does, but he has a much higher floor because Shepard is the number one guy for his offense. He's a slot receiver. He's going to get plenty of receptions. I could see this being Shepard's best season of his career. Now, I don't love him because I don't think he has a really high ceiling, but he does have a very nice floor for your fantasy team. At number 37, Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones is a little bit more hit and miss. He's a little bit more in the Will Fuller category than the Sterling Shepard category. But like I brought up, him and Kenny Golladay are a lot more 1A, 1B than people like to suggest they are. And Marvin Jones can have games where he outproduces Kenny Golladay. So that value alone is worth it. And he's more of the deep target in this offense than Kenny Golladay is. So that being said, I like Marvin Jones here. I think he's actually a pretty good value in the 7th or 8th round. At number 38, Corey Davis. Davis has been so inconsistent, and that's probably a product of his quarterback play. Marcus Mariota has been pretty bad, in my opinion, and I'm just not really drafting Davis because I don't like the Titans offense. I spoke about it with Derrick Henry, and I stick by that same thing with Davis. Plus, they brought in Adam Humphries, who is good, and they brought in other receivers who are good, and they have like 3 or 4 options, plus Delaney Walker's coming back. I just don't think there's enough footballs to go around for Davis to be like a clear-cut good option for your fantasy team. I feel like he's going to be a guy that's going to be a bit frustrating because one week he'll get 130 yards and one week he'll get 30 yards. So that's why I have Davis here at number 38 in round number 7. In the 8th round, we started with Valdes-Scantling of the Green Bay Packers. Valdes-Scantling is in the clear-cut direction and path to being the number 2 receiver for Aaron Rodgers. And whenever you're a top 2 receiver for Aaron Rodgers, I'm going to take a look at you and I probably will pick you in a couple leagues. So Valdes-Scantling to me is the most talented of the group of receivers, including Geronimo Allison. And he's the best option to have on the outside opposite Devontae Adams because of his size and athletic profile. He also showed some ability last year in certain games that I think will carry over this year. He's in a better offense this year. I do think the Packers will be a better football team, better offense in general. Valdes-Scantling in his second season should grow as a player and a receiver. And I'm really looking at him in the 8th round as a potential option here and probably has the highest ceiling of anyone in this round. At number 40, a guy that I feel like is going way too low in fantasy drafts is Emmanuel Sanders. I understand Emmanuel Sanders is coming off an Achilles injury, but Emmanuel Sanders is Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, he's really good. And did you watch him last year? Like, I know he had Case Keenum, but he was still one of the best route runners, one of the craftiest receivers in the league when he was on the field. And he looks healthy. He's been practicing nonstop. He's in training camp. Everything points towards him playing in week 1. So I don't see why I wouldn't draft Emmanuel Sanders as a very safe number 3 receiver because I think he's still the number 1 in Denver. I don't really have a doubt about that because I still think he's better than Courtland Sutton or Deshaun Hamilton. So I really like Emmanuel Sanders as my first option off my bench, or maybe even a low-end wide receiver 3, because he's very, very safe in terms of the floor. When he's on the field, he's going to get good receptions, he's going to put up yards, and sometimes he'll have 100 yards and a touchdown. And he did that last year. At number 41, I have Courtland Sutton, Denver Broncos receiver. Now, baked into this is the potential that Sutton could take place of Emmanuel Sanders as the number 1 receiver. And within this offense, I see him being more the X and Sanders being more of the Z, which is just the positions that they play in the offense. And traditionally in the Kyle Shanahan type of scheme, which is what Denver are running, the X gets more opportunities than the Z, which is why I have Sutton right beside Sanders. I just feel like Sanders is more talented, but there's also the chance that Sanders with old age does get injured and then Sutton instantly becomes a wide receiver 2 for you. I could see him becoming a wide receiver 2. But with Joe Flacco at quarterback, I feel like that ceiling is kind of topped off at a certain point. So that being said, I like Sutton and his talent. I didn't really see it come through last year. That's why I'm not so confident this year. I'd rather take Sanders over him just because I don't think Sutton has taken place of Sanders as that clear-cut number 1 in Denver. At number 42, I have Anthony Miller. I really like Anthony Miller's talent. But the thing about Anthony Miller is he's in the Chicago offense. Just like Allen Robinson, they have so many targets to go to. He's not going to be very consistent for you. Now, if somebody on that receiving corps gets injured, even one of them, his value instantly goes up because he's just going to have more consistency from a target reception standpoint. And you could see him be the number one target in this offense. I wouldn't be shocked by that because he is very talented. And he did show kind of a chemistry with Trubisky in the red zone. So I think it's worth taking a bench spot for Anthony Miller as the potential is very high and the talent is there. At number 43, Sammy Watkins, the last player here in the 8th round at the wide receiver position. Sammy Watkins is the number 2 for Kansas City, but I just can't trust him to stay on the field. And he'll have games where he's playing and he's healthy, where he'll be really good. But just the fact that I have to deal with the frustration of having Sammy Watkins on my team, I don't really want to deal with that. So I'm probably not taking Sammy Watkins unless he falls deep into the draft, like here at the end of the 8th round. I might take a look at him. At the same time, he has the potential because, like, if Tyreek Hill gets suspended, Sammy Watkins instantly becomes arguably a wide receiver 1. And at the same time, I mean, he has I'm back and forth even talking about this right now. Like, Watkins has potential, but he doesn't have potential because I don't know how talented he is at this point, but then I also don't know how healthy he is. But also, he's in the Chiefs offense, but also he could be the number 1 receiver if Hill screws up again. Like, there's so many things to talk about Sammy Watkins, but just call me skeptical and call me Sammy Watkins non-believer right now, but I could be a believer. Maybe, Sammy, make me a believer. In round number 9, I only have 2 receivers. That is Larry Fitzgerald at number 44 and John Brown at number 45. Larry Fitzgerald is Larry Fitzgerald. He's still very good. He's still making one-hand catches in practice. He's still going to be the number 2 and the number 1 slot guy in this offense and probably the safety blanket in Kyler Murray's offense. This could even be a steal here in the 9th round, and I think this is even actually kind of high compared to his ADP. But John Brown at 45, he's the number 1 guy for Josh Allen. His skill set is that he's fast, he's a deep threat, which perfect for Josh Allen. And then he's the best receiver in camp so far by reports. I think John Brown is quite the steal right now. Like, I'd like to have him on my bench because I think he could develop into a wide receiver 3 this year in fantasy. In the 10th round, we start with Tyrell Williams. Now, he could potentially go up as I'm recording this video. I just heard about the whole Antonio Brown situation. If Antonio Brown does not play, retires because of the helmet thing, I don't know why he would do that, Tyrell Williams could go up, like, into the 5th or 4th round. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. But Williams is a good receiver, and that's why I still have him here in the 10th round. Because as a number 2, I still think he can produce in the Raiders offense. Now, maybe not as well as he did in his 1,000-yard season with the Chargers, but I think you would expect the same amount of productivity as he had in the Chargers as the number 3 option. That's probably about the same productivity as you'll see in the Raiders offense as the number 2. At the same time, you could see certain games from him where he does go off because the Raiders probably will be trailing in a lot of games and Derek Carr will be chucking it up to him. And Williams has that skill set to be able to do some things. I think he's far more talented than a lot of these receivers in this category. So that's why I have him here at number 46. At number 47, Michael Gallup, the clear-cut number 2 for the Dallas Cowboys. Gallup, I actually really like. Like, I'm getting him more and more than I was earlier in the fantasy draft season. Like, lately, I've kind of been a lot higher on him and been picking him later in the draft. He is going later even than the 10th round, which is why I'm picking him. But I like him because I think he fits what Kellen Moore wants to do. I think Dak's going to be passing the ball more. And like I said, he's the clear-cut number 2. And as a sophomore player, there was some talent in him in his rookie season. There was just inconsistencies. If he can be a little bit more consistent, I think he could actually become an extreme steal in this offense because I don't think Randall Cobb's going to be a consistent force out of the slot. So somebody's got to catch the ball outside of Amari Cooper and Zeke, and I think it could be Michael Gallup, especially down the field as a deep threat. At number 48, I have Geronimo Allison, who is set to be the slot receiver for the Packers offense and the 3rd receiver for the Packers. I could see At number 48, I have the slot receiver for the Green Bay Packers, Geronimo Allison. I could see Allison even being better than Valdez-Scantling. I think you're kind of throwing a dart at either one and seeing which one sticks and which one gains the chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. Allison, though, I just don't think he has as much pure physical talent as Valdes-Scantling. That's why I have Valdes-Scantling higher on this list. But Allison could prove to be a consistent target for him out of the slot. They said they want to move him in the slot a lot more often this season. And I think that could be promising. Like, I don't think he's going to get Randall Cobb slot numbers from the Packers offense, but I think he could have some games where he'll be a nice option for you. And like I said, if he could prove to be that number 2 over Valdes-Scantling, then you probably have a steal on your hands here in the 10th round. At number 49, Devin Funchess, who right now is the number 2 receiver for the Colts. This could change with Paris Campbell, the rookie receiver out of Ohio State. But Funchess did show in the preseason game that he still has a skill set that could be heavily utilized within the red zone. I think he'll have some nice games. I think if Andrew Luck is healthy, T.Y. Hilton will draw a lot of coverage, which will allow Devin Funchess to have some one-on-ones. And Funchess is the type of guy that because he's a bigger receiver, he causes some issues for certain corners in the league. And the Colts will take advantage of that. Andrew Luck is too smart not to. So Funchess could be a nice player to stash on your bench to see what sticks in Indianapolis as the number 2 guy in the passing game. At number 50, I have DK Metcalf, rookie receiver of the Seattle Seahawks. He is going to be the number 2 receiver for Seattle. All reports out of Seattle is that they are raving about this kid, that he is the real deal, and he's certainly going to fit this offense because he's a deep threat. He's a guy that just runs fast in a straight line, and Russell Wilson is really good at throwing the deep ball. So Metcalf is going to have some really good games. And I could see Metcalf being a guy that's a matchup sort of play where if you're playing a bad secondary who gives up big plays, hey, put Metcalf in there as your wide receiver 3, and potentially you could reap the benefits of it. But also Metcalf could disappear from games, which is why he's more of a dart throw, but kind of like a higher dart throw than some of these other guys in round 11, which is why I have him in round 10. At number 51, N'Keal Harry / Myers of the Patriots. Now, Myers is a undrafted rookie who, if you watch the preseason game against the Lions, had a really good game. 2 touchdowns, over 60 yards, and he's been running with the first-team Patriots offense. The reason why I have them tied here is because whoever earns this role as the primary number 2 receiver in the Patriots passing game, I believe will be worthy of the selection and potentially even a number 3 receiver in fantasy for Tom Brady and the Patriots offense, but you just don't know who that's going to be yet. My guess right now is that it's going to be N'Keal Harry because he was not only the first round pick, but also he has a better skill set in terms of an outside wide receiver. But Myers is more of a slot guy. Myers can play a little bit of both, but he's more of the slot guy. And I feel like Edelman does kind of take up that slot a little bit more. So they need an outside guy a little bit more, which is why I'm leaning Harry. But I wouldn't hate on you if you did just take a shot in the dark on Myers. Continue to track his progress in the preseason and throughout training camp and see how the reps are given out. Also track N'Keal Harry's injury to know which one's going to gain the advantage here. But I could see both of these guys kind of taking place of Philip Dorsett as the number 2 receiver on this offense. Round 11. I want to start off with Kiki Kote. Kiki Kote was much higher on my rankings until he got injured. So keep track of his progress. I think he might be a steal if he is healthy. I don't really know the information in terms of his injury yet, but once I know it, I'll be able to rank him properly. But just know that he was on these rankings, and I think he's a good player, and I think he could have a good season as the number 3 option for Deshaun Watson. I do like his talent as a slot receiver, and I do feel like as a third down go-to guy outside of Hopkins, he could be the guy to go to when Hopkins draws the double team. Deshaun Jackson, Kenny Stills, these 2 guys are veterans who are going to have some big games in their respective offenses. Kenny Stills is the receiver I would draft from the Dolphins. I don't think he's going to be like a top 3 receiver in fantasy, but he will have his games where he plays very well. And I would probably even play him early in the season with Fitzpatrick because Fitzpatrick's going to give him opportunities to shine. I don't know about Rosen yet. And then for Deshaun Jackson, we'll have to see how his role develops in Philadelphia. He's not going to be a high reception guy, but in certain matchups, he'll have really big games as a downfield target for Carson Wentz. And we'll see how that chemistry unfolds throughout the season, but both worth a dart shot. Then you look at Paris Campbell, who I spoke on Devin Funchess, but he has the opportunity as a rookie to become the number 2 for Andrew Luck. He's excellent after the catch, very fast. He's really good underneath patterns. And Andrew Luck, he could be that kind of yak guy that they get the ball to. So he could have a role in this offense. Not a bad dart throw as well. Dante Moncrief, I think he could be the number 2 in Pittsburgh's offense. And if he does, look out for this in training camp. If he does, I'd select him higher than the 11th plus round. I'd maybe select him in the 10th or the 9th because I think still there's targets to be had there in Pittsburgh. You know, Juju can't get them all. Vance McDonald can't get them all. So who's that guy going to be? And it could be Moncrief. They did sign him pretty early in the offseason. I wouldn't be shocked if it was him. Then we go Zay Jones from Buffalo. Zay Jones, I think he sort of was the consistent guy from Buffalo for Josh Allen last year. And if this offense does progress, he's not worth the dart throw late in a round, like one of the last rounds in your draft, to just add a receiver who has the opportunity to become the number 1 in Buffalo. It's not a bad option to just throw the dart at to say, hey, this guy potentially has the opportunity to be the number 1. He potentially has a breakout season on his hands. So why not give a shot to him in my fantasy draft? Miles Boykin here from the Baltimore Ravens, another rookie name to pay attention to. I do not have Hollywood Brown on my rankings, but I do have Boykin because apparently Boykin has really played as the number 1 receiver in Baltimore. Don't be surprised if Boykin does become that number 1. And if he does, even in a Ravens offense, somebody needs to catch the ball. So Boykin could be that guy. Keep track of his progress throughout training camp and the preseason. Miles Boykin of the Ravens. Jamison Crowder has an opportunity as the slot receiver for Sam Darnold. One thing that we did see from Sam Darnold in 2018 was his willingness to throw the ball short, and Jamison Crowder is a slot receiver. So if anyone becomes his number 1, if it's not Robbie Anderson, I think it would be Jamison Crowder. It could potentially be Quincy Enunwa as well, which is why they're relatively close in my rankings here. But I could see Crowder being that guy as opposed to Enunwa. Enunwa has a little bit more of an injury history. Crowder kind of suits that wide receiver slot role a little bit better in the Adam Gase offense. They paid him quite a bit of money, and he has shown talent and fantasy relevance in the past, so I wouldn't mind you taking him as another dart throw. And then you go to a Marquise Goodwin, who should be the number 2 in San Francisco. And I don't think he'll always be the number 2, which is why I don't have him ranked higher here. But Marquise Goodwin's certainly going to have good games. And if he can stay on the field and you see that effectiveness early on in the season, he'll be a guy that you don't necessarily draft, but keep your eye out on Marquise Goodwin because he could be a guy that if you draft him in the last round, the last 2 rounds, whatever it may be, he might develop into Jimmy Garoppolo's number 1, if not his number 1, his number 2, and definitely the downfield target for this offense, which does have value. So he'll be a guy that's sort of like Deshaun Jackson, where he'll have some big games. He'll also have some quiet games, dependent on opponent, dependent on matchup. But I don't mind taking a chance on Marquise Goodwin here in the later rounds. Last receiver that I am targeting or picking in fantasy drafts right now is Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon is a guy that I will pick in the last round. He is currently not really suspended, but he's not really playing. Like, currently, he is on the commissioner's list, which means he's not going to be playing for the Patriots right now. But all signs are pointing towards the fact that he might play this season, at least at some point in this season. So I'm willing to, if I see progress on that front, I'm willing to take a dart throw right now at Josh Gordon, even though I know no information about Josh Gordon, whether he's coming back or not. But we saw last year with the Patriots, he was arguably their number 1. He was arguably higher than Edelman on the depth chart, higher than Edelman in terms of getting targets from Tom Brady and the favoritism from Tom Brady as being that number 1. So if Josh Gordon does play this year for the Patriots, he would be easily a wide receiver 2 in fantasy football. And that's why I'm picking him in my fantasy drafts right now. And I would suggest you do too in the last round of your fantasy drafts, because this is a player that in the last round of your fantasy draft, you would have a guaranteed wide receiver 2 for your fantasy team if he does suit up this year. Now, there's a chance that he doesn't. There's a chance that he does and then he leaves once again because of off the field issues. But even if you get a chance for 4 weeks of wide receiver 2 play with some wide receiver 1 upside, that's awesome. Josh Gordon's an incredible talent, and I'm willing to take my risk on him in the last couple rounds of my fantasy drafts. I hope you guys enjoyed my fantasy wide receiver rankings for the 2019 season. If you did, Gronk spike the like button, subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos just like this. It's Mitch of the Bottom Line View. Comment below your opinion, your thoughts on my rankings, and also any questions you have. Thanks for watching.